Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is the Chapter Goals for Leadership Teams, and what we're going to be going over today is how you can use BNI Connect to help you to track your chapter goals. So how big do you want your chapter to be? How many referrals do you want to pass during this time? How many new members? How much thank you for closed business? All of this information can be set up and tracked in BNI Connect, and the great part about it is that as you're going through your term, it will actually update all of the numbers so that you can keep track of how you're doing based on your goals. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. Today's webinar is a live webinar, so that means that as we're going through today's content, please do feel free to ask any questions that you'd like to. The best way to do that is to please go ahead and type the questions into the questions control panel. From there, I'll see them pop up on my screen and be able to answer them. The webinar is also being recorded. It will be made available in a couple of different places, usually within a week or so. The first place is on the support site. Now, the best way to get to the support site is when you are here in BNI Connect, click on this question mark in the upper right-hand corner. Clicking on this question mark will take you over to the support site. You'll see our list of upcoming webinars, and if you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see Chapter, Training, and Documentation. There you just click on any of the months. There'll be a new one for November up shortly. But from there, you'll see the webinars listed in chronological order, and there's a goals for leadership teams that we did last month. So you can review them there, or you can view them on our YouTube channel directly. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. So youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. Not only do we have the recorded webinars up here, but we have a ton of other information like special messages from Dr. Meisner. We have a number of educational moments, and again, the whole history of BNI Connect webinars as well. So let's go ahead and get started with today's information. And again, this is the chapter goals for leadership teams. So in order to get to the chapter goals, what we do need to do is to go beyond the home screen and into more of the back-end admin portion of BNI Connect. Now, the place that we do this is we're going to go to the menu buttons along the top. Now, a lot of people say, I'm not really sure where to find stuff in BNI Connect. So let me tell you quickly how I always remember where to find stuff. Along these menus along the top here, we have Network, Operations, and Reports. That's what most people have access to, is network, operations, and reports. Network is basically all of the networking functions. So when you're looking to interact with other people in BNI Connect, that's where you're going to go. That's where we have our groups, our connections, our testimonials. Operations is where you go to do stuff, usually when you're trying to enter information into BNI Connect. For example, you guys on the leadership team, if you're a vice president, you're going to be looking to enter a PALMS report. That's where you're going to go for the data entry pieces, goes to operations. If you're looking to pull data back out of BNI Connect, that's where we're going to go to reports. So if we want to enter our chapter goals, we're going to be going to the operations menu. So I'm going to go to operations and then chapter. Now from here, we'll see a bunch of things on the left-hand side. The first place we're going to go to is Manage Goals, and this is where our goals program is going to be listed. You'll see two options here under Manage Goals. We have Enter Chapter Goals and View Chapter Goals. Now, as a leadership team person, you will have access to enter the chapter goals. Depending on how the resources are set up in your region, some of your chapter members may also have access to viewing the goals, but usually only the leadership team can actually go in and enter the chapter goals. Now that means the president, the vice president, and the secretary-treasurer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Enter Chapter Goals. The first thing that we're going to see when we go to Enter Chapter Goals is three things: the start month and year, the long-term vision, and the mission statement. This is the first step to entering chapter goals. Now this is one of the things where you only have to set it up once, the long-term vision and mission statement. Now the start month and year, the way that we enter the goals in is in periods of 6 months at a time. So by default it's going to show the next 6 months of your term, which is going to start us here in April of 2015. Now you're not locked down to that. You can actually choose any 6-month date period you want to. It doesn't even have to start in April or October. You can choose from January, or you can choose from the current month, whatever you'd like to do. You can even go back and fix or fill in previous goals if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and move this back in the timeline a little bit. I'm going to move this to October 1st of 2014. So the start of this goal. Now again, you only have to fill out the long-term vision and mission statement once, but it is important to do this. This is a pretty important step, because what you're doing is you're kind of defining your strategy for the goals. And this might be a good chapter exercise, but it's also definitely a good leadership team exercise. Now the long-term vision is kind of where you want to get to. So that's maybe not specifically the numbers of where you want to get to, because that's what we're going to be doing when we pull up the actual goals spreadsheet. But more importantly, what's your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal for the chapter? So I'm working in the Antarctica region with my Burr chapter right now, and our long-term vision for this chapter is we are going to grow this chapter to be the largest chapter in the entire continent. In addition, we wish to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 200-mile radius. So those are some pretty big goals we have, especially in that sparsely populated continent. The next part of this is the mission statement, and these are kind of like your kind of internal guidelines for how you're going to reach the goal. Think of it as the why behind why your chapter exists. And our mission statement for this chapter is that we're going to help members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program that enables them to develop long-term, meaningful relationships with quality business professionals and create positive community goodwill. So now we have our big, hairy, audacious goal, our long-term vision, and our why, our mission statement. What principles we're going to follow in order to get there. Now I've already chosen the date range. The next thing I'm going to do is click Go. And what this is going to do is pull up the 6-month period that I'm going to work on starting from October of 2014. Now you can see I've already started to fill some of these goals out. When you open this up, this is going to appear blank. Let me go ahead and maybe I'll choose a different period here so it looks what it's going to look like when you pull it up. And you can see here that all of these goals are blank. And what we need to do is basically come up with what we want our goals to be for that period of time. Now again, this is basically a spreadsheet that we're going to be filling out. You can see the months along the top here, and down below that is all of the different chapter success drivers. And these are the chapter success drivers. What is going to make our chapter successful? And these are all the things that we're going to be measuring in our chapter. So we have attendance percentage, the total number of one-to-ones, the CEUs, visitors, new memberships, number of members in the chapter, number of referrals, and finally, thank you for closed business. So these are all the things that we're going to measure over this period of time, this 6-month period. Now within those, you're going to see 3 different lines. You're going to see a goal, and this is obviously the number that we're going to be trying to get to. And then you'll see 2 columns for mechanisms. Now what mechanisms are different activities or things that you can do in your chapter to support whatever goal it is that you're setting up. Now before we get into actually going through and talking about the various chapter success drivers, a couple of other things that you want to take a look at. Up at the top here you'll see 2 different ways in which you can enter goals. And really this ends up having to do with the kind of a back-end calculation of the results. The first way is to put in all of your goals on a whole chapter basis. So usually this means you're going to be putting in some pretty big numbers. The total number of one-to-ones for the entire chapter for the month, for example, or the total number of CEUs for the chapter for the entire month. The second way you could put in these goals is per member. And that would be, instead of it being, let's say, the total number of ones being 200 one-to-ones for the month, it's going to be, let's say, 4 one-to-ones per month, because you're looking for, let's say, one one-to-one per member. When I've seen this in the past, most people put this in with a whole chapter number. One thing to keep in mind is that you can't switch back and forth, because what this is going to affect is the calculation on the view report when you go to look at it later. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that as for whole chapter. And let's start taking a look at some of these success drivers that we have here, and there's quite a few. You do not have to necessarily do these in order, first of all. And the second thing is you don't necessarily have to do this all at once. So it is going to take quite a bit of discussion, some work with the leadership team. So if you need to, make sure that you're clicking the Save button now and again, just like you would on a really big Word document or a really big spreadsheet in Excel. You want to make sure that you save it as you're going along. BNI Connect does have a 30-minute timeout, so if you don't make any entries on the screen, after about 30 minutes, it will pop up this big warning saying, we're going to log you out in 5 minutes. And if you haven't saved it and it logs you out of the system for security reasons, you will lose whatever you put in here. So make sure that, every once in a while you go in and make sure you click this Save button at the bottom of the screen. It'll let you know that it's going to save it. And then it'll just return you right back to this screen so you can save it and continue working. And at the bottom, it said it was saved successfully. All right, so let's take a look at the first thing on the list here, and that is attendance percentage. One of my strategies when I'm going ahead and putting various goals into the system is I always like to begin with the end in mind. So rather than working from April and working my way up, I tend to work from the end and work my way backwards. So at the end of this 6-month period, I'd really like to get our chapter to 100% attendance rate. So I'm going to put that goal in of 100%. And I also know that right around now, we're at about a 92% attendance rating. So what I can do is put my goal in for the end of the current month of, let's say, maybe I want to bring it up to 93% and kind of break down the difference so that I can incrementally get to my goal that I'm trying to get to at the end. So maybe after the first month, I'm going to bring this up a couple of percentage points and steadily work my way up from there until I reach that 100%. Now let's talk about mechanisms. So again, the mechanisms are really, how am I going to accomplish this goal? As a leadership team, what things can I do with my chapter in order to help my chapter to achieve this goal? Now, one of the things that we often do on leadership teams is we tend to take things on a week-by-week basis. We may decide to do something kind of at the last minute, and therefore some of the longer range processes may not have a chance to happen. What this does is it allows us to really take a look at the bigger picture of our chapter and plan things out for the longer term. So what are some things that we could do with our chapter that support increasing the attendance percentage? Well, one thing I know is that we've never been very good in our chapter at sending out the attendance letters. So when somebody misses a meeting, sending them the control letter to say, hey, you missed your first meeting. Hope everything's okay. And then when they miss the second meeting, by the way, you have 2 absences. Just a reminder that after the 3rd absence, we may open up your category to a new qualified professional. So these are things that I want to work on with my leadership team up here in Antarctica. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mechanism in to make sure that the control letters are being sent. So that's going to be something that I'm going to work on with my leadership team during that month. Maybe something else that we can work on is to have the educational coordinator do an educational moment on the power of substitutes, why you should have a substitute there. So maybe I'll put this in as a second mechanism. So I'm going to say EdMom, educational moment on subs. And that'll be my reminder that this month, those are 2 things I can do to help to support this particular goal. Now, if you're looking for ideas on what you can do, I highly recommend having a one-to-one with your director consultant for your chapter. They can definitely give you some great ideas for different mechanisms, but we also have a little shortcut up here in the upper right-hand corner, and that is the Chapter Goal Guide. If you click on the Chapter Goal Guide, you'll see a whole bunch of possible mechanisms for each benchmark or success driver. So, for example, for the category of attendance, we could do follow-up phone calls by the membership. So if somebody's absent, they pick up the phone and they call them. So you know what? I think that's a good idea. I'm going to go and copy this and put this in. I'm going to work on that in next month. And again, what we're trying to do here is to plan out the whole term. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next set of goals. So right now we have total number of one-to-ones. Now with total number of one-to-ones, that's going to depend on my chapter size. So you know what? I might want to skip this one, and I think I'm going to go down and work on my total number of members in the chapter first, because that's going to help me to define what I want the rest of my goals to be. So right now, our chapter has 22 members in it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in as a starting point. And we really, really want to grow our chapter to about 35 members over the next 6 months. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in as a finishing goal. So let's take a look and see what I have to do to get from 22 to 35. That's a difference of, well, about 13 or about 2 to 3 net members per month. So I'm going to bring this up by 2 to make it 24, then 26. And you know what? I think right around this time, we're going to start planning a Visitors Day. And we're going to have a pretty good showing for that. And hopefully end up with 35. So I know that, again, I'm going to be planning a Visitors Day towards this September time period, so maybe I'm going to put this in as a mechanism. So you notice what I'm doing here is I'm not necessarily working sequentially, but I'm thinking about what things are happening at different times during the year. Let's see. Holly says, just to be clear, you're putting in 35, meaning you want 35 new members or 35 total members. So yes, 35 total members. So this is the total number of members in chapter. So this is basically your chapter size. So I would like my chapter size by the end of this 6-month period to be 35 members. Does that help, Holly? Excellent. So that's the number of members, and again, there are some supporting chapter goal guides here for number of members in chapter as well, such as execute effectively on visitors per month and memberships per month. Now, supporting the number of members in chapter, I may also want to, there's going to be 2 other things that help to support that, number of visitors, as well as new memberships. And here I think this is where, Holly, you might be referring to. So right above the number of members in chapter, we do have new memberships. So we do need to support the number of new members in our chapter by the number of new memberships. Now, when you're thinking about the number of new memberships, one thing that you definitely want to keep in mind is that there'll always be some attrition that you have to account for in your chapter. You know, most chapters lose approximately 1 to 1.5 members per month, barring all other circumstances. You know, people change jobs, people may retire, or they get too successful and don't want to renew, or whatever the reason is, we all tend to lose some members over the course of time. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind as well as your goal. So I always like to make sure I put an extra one on each one of these months. So going from 22, we're probably going to need at least one new member to maintain that. If we want to go from 22 to 24, we're going to need 3 memberships. And again, to go from 24 to 26, we're probably going to need another 3. And 1, and then we're going to have a Visitors Day, and we're hoping to bump up significantly. We're going to shoot for 7 new memberships there, so I'm going to put in 8. And then another couple of memberships here. And what are things that can support these new memberships? Again, I have something here that supports multiple goals, this Visitors Day. So I'm going to put in Visitors Day. Now, the other thing with Visitors Day is you do need to plan those a couple of months in advance. So I'm going to put in this other mechanism here, Start Planning Visitor Day. And this is also going to support the new memberships. And you can see we're starting to now complete our picture a little bit better as we're going through. So going back up, let's take a look at some of these other ones. Total number of one-to-ones. Now, my goal for this one, for total number of one-to-ones, is I want to make sure that every single one of our members is doing at least one one-to-one per week. So if we have currently 22 members in the chapter and there's 4 weeks in the month, I'm going to say that we're going to shoot for a minimum of 88 one-to-ones per month. And as the chapter grows, hopefully people are doing slightly more one-to-ones as they're being educated on it, as well as the fact that we're growing our chapter as well. So knowing that I wanted to have 24 members, we're going to be looking to do at least 100, let's say, one-to-ones, and we can go up sequentially from there as well. So the goals do tie into each other as well as support each other. Now, one thing I've always wanted to do in my chapter is a BNI game, so I'm going to do a BNI game, I think, starting in May. For anybody that may not know what the BNI game is, the BNI game is a way to break your chapter into teams and have a nice friendly competition. Usually it lasts anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, and how you work it is you get points for certain things that you're doing in the chapter meeting. So, for example, having a one-to-one that week, that might be worth 5 points in your chapter. And everybody in your team that has a one-to-one, you get 5 points that goes towards your team total. And maybe CEUs are worth 5 points apiece, or showing up on time is worth 5 points. The great thing about the BNI game is that you can really tweak the numbers of the game to how you would like to use them, especially if you're struggling on a certain aspect. For example, if you're really, really looking to grow the chapter, maybe you want to make sure that if you sponsor a new member, that's 100 points. So it gives you a big bonus for having completed the activity that you're looking to accomplish. Now, the great thing about the BNI game is that that one really does help with just about everything. So I'm going to make sure I put that in as a mechanism under each one of these activities. I'm just copying and pasting it. And the other thing is, because it lasts for 2 months, I can really use that as a mechanism for 2 months. All right, and CEUs and visitors, number of referrals, and thank you for closed business. Again, these are all the same type of mechanism where we're going to talk about ways to grow them based on what your chapter goals are. All right, so we're getting close to the bottom of the hour. I do like to try to keep these to 30 minutes to make sure that everybody can get back to their business. What I'd like to do is to open this up for questions. Again, just a reminder that we are recording this. It will be made available on our YouTube channel as well as on the support site. All right, so what questions do you have about the chapter goals? All right, well, you think of your questions on the input sheet, After you're done with your chapter goals, after you've filled this whole sheet out, and again, it may take a couple of sittings to do this with your leadership team, do make sure that you hit the Save button. And really the beauty of this whole part of the system is that it will start to populate your goals based on the POMS report. So it will give you your results of how well that you're doing. So I'm going to go back to the operations menu here. And I'm going to go to Manage Goals. Now if I click on View Chapter Goals, by default it's going to show me the current 6-month period. And what we'll see here is we'll see our long-term vision, we'll see our mission statement, but as the months progress, we've only had one so far this time, but you'll see that my goal for attendance was 86% in October, and we had an actual of 89% for the chapter. Our total number of one-to-ones was 100 for October. We only had 4. We probably need to work on this a little bit more in Antarctica. But CEUs, 100, we had a value of 2. And these, as the months go by, will continue to populate. Let me show you some real data from a random chapter so that you can see really what this means. I know there's a couple of regions here in the United States that use this extensively in all of their chapters across the region. So let's take a look at a chapter here. I'm going to go back 6 months so that we can have a look at a lot of data here. And this is a chapter down in Florida. You can see that they have set up a long-term vision as well as a mission statement to get back to basics. And they have their goals. And you can see what it's doing is it's populating their goals along the way. So for example, the total number of one-to-ones, they had a goal of nearly 500, 488, and they ended up with 387 at the end of that month. And they increased to 414 and then 321. So you can see it's keeping them on track. They filled out what they're going to be doing each month, and they can use this as a roadmap for their success for the chapter for the entire term. And of course, this can be printed out. It can be exported. So you can share this with your leadership team or with your whole chapter if you'd like to as you're going through the goals. If, let's say, you just want to share the actual and the goal, you can export this to Excel and delete those extra lines out. So, Lynn, I guess we just answered your question. How do you pull the report? And that was it. Let's see. Shelley has a question. Who sees the goals? You mentioned some areas might allow members to view them. Who else? So as far as the entering the goals, usually it's only the leadership team. So the president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. Viewing the goals, again, it depends on which region you're in and how they've set up permissions in your region. A lot of regions do allow the members to actually view the chapter goals, but only the leadership team is allowed to enter them. But again, each region is a little bit different. Of course, your director consultant and your executive director will also be able to view your chapter goals. Let's see. Hallie says, how frequently should the leadership team review these? Just monthly? I would say that one, I would have a talk with your director consultant. Different regions have different, basically procedures for how often the leadership team should meet and how often they should be updating their goals. There are some regions that say that you should go back to this on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or once every 6 months. Some of it's also going to depend on how long your term is, whether you're 6 months or if you do 2 consecutive 6-month terms. Personally, I would be reviewing the results on almost a weekly basis, at worst a monthly basis. If you find that your goals are way off base or if the things that you're doing are unsuccessful, then immediately go back, and you can go back and adjust your goals as well. So it's not, once you put them in there, they're not permanent. You can go in and say, you know what, maybe I was a little over aggressive in thinking that we were going to do 1,000 one-to-ones per month. You can go back and maybe adjust that down a little bit to a more realistic number, or if you're not reaching your chapter size goal quickly enough. Does that make sense, Hallie? Does that help? All right, what other questions? How else can I help you? Jeff Stay had a question. He says, will the officers be able to see this using their access, and will the members be able to see it, or is this director only? Again, from a member perspective, the leadership teams can definitely use this. Again, unless you've changed that in your region by default, leadership teams can enter goals. Members can usually view the goals. There is a regional level tool for executive directors and director consultants only. There is a report at the regional level where you can view all of the goals for all of your chapters at the same time. So you can go under meeting statistics, and I believe there is a goal guide. Here it is. It's under regional office, chapter goals program report. And you could, for example, run this for an entire region and see all of your chapters and all of their goals and how they're doing. But again, this particular one is a region level only report. So hopefully that answers your question, Jeff. Joseph says, can the visitor host see this? And again, the visitor host might be able to view the chapter goals, but won't be able to enter any goals. And if you can't see it, then that's definitely a conversation to have with your executive director, because they can manage the permissions and change them if necessary. All right, any additional questions? All right, just a reminder, this is being recorded. You'll be able to catch it on YouTube or on the support site. Just click this little question mark here, and that will take you over to our support site. Now, a good referral for me is to please let other people know about these webinars. We have another leadership team only webinar coming up this Friday. And that's at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. That's going to be on some of the other tools and reports that are in the system just for leadership teams. And then after that, we're going to be starting on our member series, the first of which is going to be building VCP with BNI Connect, or how to fill out your profile and where it all goes and what it all means. And that one's going to be next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So that's a great one to recommend to all of the new members in your chapter or anybody that hasn't logged into BNI Connect yet. All right, I thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Happy connecting, everyone.